New York Attorney General Leticia James has been indicted on charges of bank fraud and making false statements to acquire a loan. What does that mean for you? We're going to talk about that in this video here. I'm attorney Drew Page with the law firm Tidewater Defenders, and represent criminal defense cases and traffic offense cases in Virginia. Interestingly, the Leticia James indictment is in the Eastern District of Virginia in Norfolk, which is the same city where my criminal defense law firm office is. So I'll be following this because I'm going to be right there in Norfolk, and I'll try to attend as much as I can and get as much information for you as I can. But wanted to walk through this indictment because, as many of you know, Leticia James is the one who sued President Donald Trump and basically caused a legal process nightmare for the president as he was running for office. And now the president has essentially helped the former Eastern District of Virginia U.S. attorney resign. A new one is in place. And now that particular official is through his office or her office, I can't remember who was appointed, doesn't really matter, is now pushing the envelope to both, of course, have an indictment against James Comey and now have an indictment against Leticia James. And but they're for different reasons. But in this one, we're just going to look at the indictment for Leticia James because I think it's pretty interesting. And it has some important information for those of us who follow Grant Cardone and are interested in rental real estate, because it addresses not so much just general loans, but the nature and use of property when you're obtaining a loan, particularly a Fannie Mae loan. So let's take a look at this indictment. So the first page of the indictment just basically gives the caption. It has the case name, United States of America versus Leticia A. James. Scrolling down, it gives you the general allegations that Leticia James is a resident of New York. The different loan companies, one is in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which again is right down the road from where my office is. The Fannie Mae party is mentioned here. The First Savings Bank is referenced from Jeffersonville, Indiana. And then it gets to the facts beginning on paragraph 5 on the second page. It says, on or about August 17, 2020, James, as sole borrower, purchased a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom property in Norfolk, Virginia for approximately $137,000 with a mortgage loan financing of $109,600 backed by Fannie Mae. And one of the provisions of the loan, as mentioned in the indictment on paragraph 6, is that as the sole borrower to occupy and use the property as her secondary residence, and prohibited its use as a time-sharing or other shared ownership arrangement or agreement that requires her either to rent the property or give any other person any control over the occupancy or use of the property. And so essentially the loan term said that this has to be a second primary residence. She needs to be living there rather than primarily renting the property out or time-sharing. And in fact, it says that it limits it. It's prohibited for use as a timeshare. And so it's important to make sure you know your loan terms. If you're looking at a property and you're trying to get favorable loan terms, don't say that you're going to be living there and then don't live there. I follow Grant Cardone. He does a lot of motivational stuff, which is great, a lot of real estate stuff, which is great. But when this Fannie Mae 4-unit thing came out, he made a big deal about how, you intend to move there, but then maybe your intent changes. And I would be very, I know he's doing a little showmanship, and that's fine. But I would be very cautious about, changing intents when you're dealing with federally backed loans, particularly if you're going to end up running for office, because, obviously that's going to catch a lot of attention. And if you have political opponents, you're more likely to pay the piper. But anyway, so paragraph 7 says that the Perrone property, which is the Norfolk property, was not occupied or used by James as a secondary residence and was instead used as a rental investment property renting the property to a family of 3. So apparently she rented it out for a single family use rental situation. Paragraph 8 is where we start to get into the facts relating to the charges. It says this misrepresentation allowed James to obtain favorable loan terms not available for investment property. So if you're getting a commercial loan, or if it's a secondary property and you're allowed to use it for rental terms, you may end up not getting the same mortgage rate. But I mean, it's really not going to be that much of a difference. But make sure that you understand your loan terms. Talk to your attorney, talk to your financial advisor, loan officer, and make sure you understand what you can and cannot do. Ask all the right questions, and make sure that you are complying with the law, regardless of the loan terms. But I mean, we're talking about a note rate of 3%, which that's a pretty good rate, especially in these days. Avoiding the higher rate, which I mean it's 0.815% higher. So I mean it's a difference, as the indictment notes, of $17,000. So in a seller credit of a few $1,000s, $3,288, and then for total ill-gotten gains of approximately $18,933 over the life of the loan. So we're talking about $18,933 is the difference between the terms that she got, allegedly, according to the indictment, versus what they should have been if it was going to be solely a rental property. And then they talked about, in paragraph 9, the homeowner's insurance application, tax forms, so they've got the IRS involved, as far as, how the property was used and so forth. And it says that the loan was acquired by or assigned to First Savings Bank in March 2021. So again, that's kind of the gist, and that all these acts occurred in the Eastern District of Virginia. So the first count is for bank fraud. Says from on or about August 7, 2020 through at least January 2024 in the Eastern District of Virginia, Leticia A. James did knowingly execute and attempt to execute a scheme and artifice to defraud OVM Financial and First Savings Bank, financial institutions, and to obtain monies and so forth under false pretenses. And then the scheme involved falsely representing the property as a secondary residence to get favorable terms. And then count 2 is a false statements to a financial institution, and based on the same allegations. And the dates are a little different, from July 28, 2020 through August 31, 2020, that James did knowingly make and cause to be made false statements and reports for the purpose of influencing the action of OVM Financial, which is a Fannie Mae-backed lender. And so, when in fact James then knew the property was intended and used as an investment property with no intended or actual personal occupancy. So again, be careful with what you're trying to do with getting a loan and how you're using the property. All of those factors are going to play into what your intent was. Again, I know Grant Cardone said, well, you might have intended when you signed the loan, but then that intent changes. Fannie Mae has some very specific terms. You're supposed to reside in the property for 1 year. And then, after that 1 year period, then you can rent the property out, and you still get all the benefits of the favorable terms, but you have to live in the property for 1 year. And, there's ways to prove that, your furniture's in there, your stuff's in there, people see you there. There's ways to make sure that it shows that you are primarily residing there for that 1 year period. I mean, does it mean that your physical body needs to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 365 days? Well, of course not. But it needs to show that you are primarily residing there as a secondary residence for that 1 year period. And again, talk to your loan officer, talk to your attorney. Everything I'm telling you is for educational reasons. This is not to be relied upon for your individual circumstance. You need to make sure that you get that advice. But that's just the basic understanding of the up to 4 unit secondary property. So make sure that if you're trying to get those favorable terms, you're following the law in that regard. Because if you're not, you can find yourself in some hot water. So anyway, and then they have the standard forfeiture. If they determine that you are guilty, they basically have a civil forfeiture or criminal forfeiture that is allowable for them to be able to recoup the funds for any of the victims and so forth. So this was a true bill, and it was put out by a grand jury. So again, you may say, was the politicians doing it? And there's little doubt that the politicians aren't pushing it. But ultimately, they had to convince a grand jury to indict on these charges in the city of Norfolk, which, by the way, is not the reddest part of Virginia. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. I will follow this case. Like I said, it's in the same city as my office. So to the extent I'm able to attend, if I'm free from court days and so forth, I'll try to follow this along. But again, this is what happens when you use the court system for political reasons. I mean, eventually it comes back. The other side gets power, and then it comes back. We are sadly in a very divided country, and frankly, I don't know that there's going to be any remedy to it. What do you think about this indictment? Do you think it's just a political sham? Do you think there's actually something there? What do you think about Grant Cardone and his take on the Fannie Mae loans? Let me know down in the comments. Till next time, stay tuned.